The cemetery picnic. Alex asked Lily out for the first date to meet. She proposed a strange place. An old cemetery, according to her, was where the sunset had the best view she knew. Quirky, Alex thought, agreeing with the plan. Lily was captivating. Their laughter, stories, even that peculiar fascination with graves. As the sun set, she said they should sit by an ancient, crumbling tombstone. As they spoke, Alex grew aware of something wrong. The shadows around them appeared to move of their own accord. They stretched and curled like fingers. He said so, but Lily just smiled. "They're curious about you." The air turned glacial. Alex breathed steam where he would have sworn it was midsummer. He tried to rise, but his body seemed weighted down, as if something was pinning him to the ground. But Lily's face changed. The bright smile twisted into a grotesque snarl. "They have picked," she whispered. Her voice came back to her from a distance. Hands cold, decaying, clawed out, had burst from the ground to drag Alex down. Lily's face remained blank. Alex's screams were lost in the earth. Next morning, the headstone showed a new message. Alex's name and the day he died. The Haunted Mansion Dinner. Celeste, Liam's match, called him for a private dinner with her family at their mansion. It sounded fancy, but he couldn't resist it. When he came, the mansion looked like something straight out of a gothic horror film grand, yet ominously decayed. Celeste received him in a flowing black dress, her pale skin glowing under the dim chandeliers. Dinner was lavish, but Liam couldn't manage to rid himself of the feeling that someone's eyes were trained on him. The walls were lined with portraits, all features shown, all slightly resembling, eerily like Celeste. "Do your family?" Liam asked. She nodded, mysterious smile touching her lips. "They're here still, in a way." As dessert was served, whispers began. Faint, almost indistinguishable, but certainly there. The portraits shifted, their eyes tracking. "You are the first guest in a long time," Celeste said, her voice moving into some sort of echo chamber. "They are eager." The whispers grew to murmurs and moans, and the air thickened to make it hard for Liam to breathe. Celeste's face warped into something monstrous, with her eyes glowing yellow from a place that was unnatural. The last thing Liam saw as he blacked out were the portraits. Their subjects were stepping out of the frames. The mirror that shows what you fear most. Kevin just kind of walked around his new dorm room in quiet relief, finally to have the quiet space he needed to study. It was small, decorated hardly beyond an old large mirror left by the previous tenant. He hardly noticed it at first, but soon enough, strange reflections started catching his attention. Fleeting shadows, faces that weren't his, and a version of his room that seemed slightly twisted. One night, still studying late, he looked up to see a figure standing directly behind him in the mirror. The room was empty. Frozen in fear, he watched as it leaned closer, and then vanished when he spun around. Days passed, and the visions the mirror reflected were darker. He lies in a hospital bed, screams for help, is underwater, or huddles in a corner. Such was the terror he never spoke to anyone about. Terrified, Kevin opted to dispose of the mirror. It did not matter if he left it in the hallway, the basement, or out of the house. At dawn the next day, it would find its way to his room. Desperate, he opted to smash it. Within a split second from which the mirror shattered all changes, his surroundings, and his current location, is a version of his room. It seemed that dark shadows were on top of the walls climbing at him, and distorted laughter. Kevin looked away from his reflection, but found himself now trapped inside the mirror, looking out into the room. There was a knock at the door. A new tenant entered and found the same mirror propped up against the wall. As they moved it into place, Kevin's reflection began to grin. The cycle was beginning again. The midnight delivery. Tommy was a delivery boy. He was living hand to mouth. He accepted the late-night delivery on a deserted road that paid a huge tip, but he didn't bother with the odd instructions. Do not leave the package alone. It was an old, deserted house in the middle of nowhere, dark with only a light on the porch that flickered. He knocked on the door, which groaned open to admit a wraith-like figure, a dark shape standing in the corners of the room. "Come in," he called, extending a bony hand. Tommy handed over the package, but he insisted that Tommy enter first. Reluctantly, Tommy stepped inside, noting the photographs on the walls, faces with empty eyes that seemed to watch his every step. The man handed him another package to bring back with him, and he said, "Once you have it, don't open it, no matter what." As Tommy drove back, strange things started to happen. Shadows moved by in front of his car as he checked the rear-view mirror to find that apparently someone was sitting in his back seat and staring into him. Next, an SMS on his phone says, "Why didn't you listen?" Panic drove him mad, and Tommy noticed himself driving around the loop of the same stretch of highway over and over again. He couldn't help but open it. Inside the package, there were 2 photographs. The first was of him. The second was a complete stranger, with a dead expression on his face, as if he didn't know what to say in front of the camera. Again, his phone beeped. "Your turn now." With his heart beating hard, he saw a figure standing in the road, swerving to avoid hitting the figure, his car stalling. As the story would end, he gazes back through his rear-view mirror. His own terrified face will have been replaced by a blank stare of the man in the package. The town where nobody sleeps on a late-night road trip, Sarah and Mark stumbled upon a small, quiet town. Shops were open, lights were on, but the streets eerily silent. While passing through the town square, they noticed something odd. Everyone stood or sat with vacant expressions, moving in slow, synchronized gestures. They tried to ask for the way. However, nobody appeared to notice their existence. They felt uncomfortable and resolved to leave, but each road from that location led them back to this place. Eventually, they were forced to park and spend the night inside their car. At midnight, a bell rang at the town clock tower, and everybody materialized from nowhere. People stood up as one and formed a circle in the town square. Mark and Sarah emerged from the darkness. They mingled into the sea of faces around them, and they tried to be engulfed by it all. Horror etched in their features as a man stiffened, his lifeless, glassy eyes falling backwards, staring at some non-existent spot. Entranced, Sarah began swaying to the people, while Mark pulled her back, reminding her of herself, and to wake from that trance. Still, those people began looking their way. Their heads began to swing over like some machine programmed by something alien. Mark grabbed Sarah, and they frantically tried to find a way out. Turning a corner, they saw an old woman with a rather grim expression whispering to them, "Once you enter, there's no going back. Now you're part of the pattern." She faded into the crowd, and they realized that they were trapped in a town where no one ever slept, and now neither could they.